I brought Sharon Neiman. She is the Plymouth County CPC, and she's going to talk to us about the, what do you call it?
West Iowa Contract and Consortium Group.
Okay. And then our local provider with the Howard Center, Administrator John Winkleman, is also here to listen and see what she has to say.
Okay. I don't know how much Lisa's told you. I'll give you a brief background on it. We started originally, I don't know how long you guys have been around. I know Rick's been around a little bit, but we used to have those cluster meetings kind of with areas, and they were providers and they were boards of supervisors, and maybe a commission member would show up every now and then or whatever. And like everything else, as DHS regions got wider span, they kind of disbanded, and we didn't have them anymore. And then we kind of felt like the providers and the CPCs and the boards of supervisors needed some way to gather information together and hear it all at once and such. And so then we came up with, then the whole CRIS process kind of came into view about how to file for fiscal and statistical reports and stuff. And so out of this kind of came up with this Northwest Iowa Contract Consortium Group. Southwestern and Southeastern had them in the past, and we kind of looked at those, and we decided that we needed a more collaborative effort and have some ownership to it. So we did do 2080 agreements and such, and filed them with the state as a noted group and such. And we started out with 11 counties, and right now currently we're down to 9 counties. The 2 counties that left were Emmett and Dickinson. And the reason why they pulled out of our consortium was when the CRIS process started coming into light and everything, and as more counties joined it, the year that CRIS process evolved in our area, Emmett and Dickinson counties were having the need to pursue the CRIS process quite quickly, and they were wanting to do that with their providers. And the other 9 counties were like, we were kind of kinder to our providers and said, well, wait a minute, this is like giving you all these new documents to do in 4 months and get everything up and running and going. And instead we chose that we wanted to wait until the next fiscal year so that we had a year of kind of education and figure out what.
So did you all join the CRIS operation?
Yes, we did. But we all joined at the same time, but Emmett and Dickinson wanted to do it quickly and get going with it with their providers, and the rest of us were kind of feeling that we were rushing our providers too quickly and that they really didn't understand what they were all getting into and what the process was. So we decided to not join it, and Emmett County and Dickinson County decided to leave the Northwest Iowa Contract and Consortium Group. But the 9 of us have stayed together, and the other thing was we talked to providers and stuff over the course of developing this group. It was, counties used to say, we have so many contracts with so many different providers. Like in Plymouth County, we have a 50-bed RCF. And we could have up to, at some points, we could have had up to 20 different contracts with 20 different counties for people who are staying out there, because each county had to have a signed contract. Well, when the consortium came in place, if you were one of those 9 counties that belonged to this group and you placed somebody at the RCF in Lamar's, the rates were discussed and signed, and you knew what that agency provided and such, and you could place them there, and you just used our contracting consortium contract. And then we started getting other counties that would call one of the 9 of us and say, you have this contract in place, it's been basically signed, sealed, and delivered and agreed on. Can we just piggyback onto your contract and just sign off on a one-sheet memorandum versus doing a whole contract with private group or somebody? And so it's worked out well that way. The one thing that, and I might be getting a little ahead of myself, but when we are talking about providers, is each provider still files a fiscal and statistical report based on their costs, their service needs. They do everything that they need to do for I-Bailey and the CRIS process. I-Bailey is the accounting firm that does that. And then the reports come back out to us, and we have a day in December that we meet and we negotiate the rates for any rates that CRIS and I-Bailey has set, and the providers have turned in an F&S report for. And then we negotiate the rate and stuff and look at all the information that's in front of us and come up with a collaborative effort as to what we think is doable. The good thing about that is that all 9 counties are conversing to one another and saying, just because Sac County may have money in their budget and Plymouth County doesn't, Plymouth County, which is, I don't know if it's true for you, but it's true for me. I'm close to a waiting list, but if my provider still got raises in Plymouth County based on the consortium feeling that it was warranted, I might not be able to pay those rates, but I have to work that out myself within my budget, if that makes sense. So what I'm saying is, like, for instance, your rate might be $52 a day, and that's what it's needed, and this 9-county consortium agrees to pay the $52 a day. Lisa could still say, well, I think that's a little high, but then there's a group effort, and the conversation occurs as to, but look at it, Lisa, you know, he's working at 98% production level, and he really does need this rate. She says, well, I really can't afford it. Well, but we're not looking at just Sac County's budget, we're looking at everybody's budget, and that what we feel is fair, and that everybody stays along even with the system, versus remember when it was the old state system, and you guys would get froze for 5-6 years, and there was no, we couldn't pay adequately for a state case to a county case. You know, there was that uneven equity of funding. Well, now state cases are considered the same as county cases are, and we manage them, and we have to pay equal across the board. So it has given us, I think it's given our providers equity in our area as to there's more than just one board of supervisor, there's more than one CPC, there's more than one provider at the table, and we kind of look at everybody across the board and report on those FNSs, and you really understand them and look at them closely. So our providers haven't wanted to stop doing it this way. They feel that the board is represented, the Northwest Iowa Contract and Consortium Board is represented by one board of supervisor member from each county, and they're the voting members of the final say of anything. The CPCs and the providers are only there to interject their opinions and their concerns and work with it, but the actual voting members are the board of supervisor members, that one member from each of the counties.
Who's in this consortium?
The counties that are in it?
Yeah.
The counties currently that are in it are Cherokee, Plymouth, Woodbury, Lyon, Osceola, Palo Alto, Sioux, O'Brien, and Clay are the 9 counties that we currently have in. And the other thing that we've been able to do with this group too, beyond just rate setting and negotiations, is we bring in, we only meet quarterly actually, except for we meet an extra time in December about rate time for new budgets and stuff, but we meet quarterly, and we try to bring in guest speakers and stuff when we meet so that everybody, there's more than just rates discussed all the time. Like last month when we met, Tom Buska, the service area manager, came up and spoke to our group and told us about what's going on with them, and our concerns was, as far as this group was, is that waiver applications weren't being addressed timely, and Medicaid recipients were getting knocked off because review sheets were coming up and then they don't get them done timely, and kind of a variety of things that we talked with Mr. Buska about. But it was very good meeting, and it wasn't one against the other. It was just a lot of information, our concerns given. He provided us with new telephone numbers and how to get a hold of people, and the frustrations, like in Plymouth County, we lost our DHS office this last go around, and some counties lost theirs many years ago, but for a county our size, we thought it was kind of ridiculous that there wasn't much we could say about it. It was done.
So who has your regional office?
Tom Buska now has the 33 counties on this side of the state, and our closest office would be Orange City or Sioux City.
Okay.
So some of our files went to Orange City, some of them went to Sioux City. It just depends on how the workload was distributed. So we had ongoing concerns with that. The time before that, we always invite our local legislators to come in so that we can talk to them about mental health concerns And sometimes that goes beyond mental health. It goes to the dual diagnosis with substance abuse and developmentally disabled, brain injured, any diagnosis that has anything on the table. And we write position papers with the 9 counties standing and kind of agreeing on what we feel that's important for ISAC to look at and things. So we kind of feel that we have a little bit stronger voice than many for Northwest Iowa than just one letter from Plymouth County, and you know, you can send out the emails, but we kind of used it too as a mechanism of togetherness and unity for all those other concerns that come along the way. Basically, we have a $100 startup fee for each county that comes in, and we use that for postage and mailing, and when we meet for negotiations, we have a luncheon thing and such. But that $100 comes in, and I've been on it since the onset, and I think a couple of years ago we had to pitch in another 25 bucks to make things meet, but it's not a very cost prohibited group to belong to by any means, other than the time of somebody driving to a quarterly meeting, you know. And we usually always meet in Cherokee up at the state hospital unless that room's not available. Then we've met in Cherokee down at the Board of Supervisors room. We always have really good discussions at it, and concerns, you know, come up, and like I said, we always have a good attendance, so I don't think that people are not liking it. I mean, the day you were there, we had a pretty good attendance, yeah. And I don't know, any other questions you guys have, or what you want to?
I guess what are the big benefits for us? And then I guess I'd like to hear what Mr. Winkleman might have to say about it.
I'm thinking. I would like to talk to some of the providers that are involved in it.
Yeah.
And you know, we didn't want to do the CRISP report in the beginning, and because it's very time consuming.
It
still is very time consuming. It's an extra cost to my bookkeeper and my assistant and I to get the CRISP reports done. When we got through the CRISP reports, they actually were more favorable towards us than the IME report, but it didn't make any difference. You know, it's like we'd go through that CRISP report, and yes, it tells us a lot of good information, and it'll tell Lisa a lot of good information, but it doesn't really, you know, there's really no negotiations that ever happen out of that CRISP report at this point. We've been doing, what, 3 or 4 years, I think. That's a concern because it is a costly thing, and if it would benefit either or both sides, then, you know, it makes sense to do the CRISP report. But at this point, we've done it for 4 years, and, you know, it's a lot of work, and we haven't really. What do you negotiate? I mean, a lot of times have come back that we should be getting paid more than we're getting paid, but there's no negotiation for that. You know, what do you do with that?
Locally, you guys don't negotiate off those.
Locally, we don't. What, you know, my understanding was back when Guessau was head of Medicaid, he said pretty clearly that the contract between the states and Centers for Medicaid and Medicare was that the state contract says this is how you're going to establish rates, and that they shouldn't be changed by anyone, basically, because otherwise you're not following the contract between the feds and the states. And so that's when we started getting paid what Medicaid, because we weren't getting paid what Medicaid said we were supposed to be getting paid. And then the county back in July of 2009 decided, just, you know, you guys started paying us what our rates for Medicaid were, so that got us started to get back out of the whole. You know, and as far as consortium is concerned, I'm like Rick too. You know, what benefit is it to providers in that, you know, from a standpoint?
These are all county rates that we're negotiating at the table. They're nothing to do with IME or Magellan or Medicaid. Yeah. They're just county rates that are looked at the table here.
And if you were working with the CRISP report, I don't have a problem with that, because the CRISP report is a good report as far as when you're reporting. Okay, this is our income and expenses, and again, the CRISP report has been just as equitable, or sometimes even more equitable than the IME report. But of course, the IME report doesn't establish county rates, and so if you're just looking at county rates, then I'm interested.
Yeah, it's just the county rates that we're looking at. We have discussions a lot at the table about inequities between IME and Magellan and stuff,
right.
and that's another thing with this group, is that we've said, you know, maybe collaboratively as an effort we could lobby for better rates, you know, more equitable rates and such. But yeah, no, we're just looking at the county rates for most of these. Some of those other rates are brought in, and we, like I said, we talk about them, but this is basically all the county rates.
Yeah, then I would say, as you look down, you know, as the House File 45 or whatever you're talking about, moving to a state system or a state managing them or matching the Medicaid dollars. And I don't know what all that means yet, and the devil's in the details always with that too, because you read the law, but then it goes to DHS or whatever department, and then they make up the rules, and so you really don't know what you have until you have it. And so that's, you know, what they're saying is, you know, I don't know how you guys feel about House File 45 and how that affects the counties, and I'm not sure how it's going to affect the counties. I hear horror stories of what it can do to the counties. I can also hear horror stories of what it does to small providers like myself, is that, you know, everything, it's just like Obamacare, if you will. It's a matter of every item I've seen in that the new healthcare system pushes me as an employer to just stop providing health care for my employees. It would cost me, the last time I heard, it would cost me $2,000 a year in fines per person for not providing health care, but it cost me $1,000 more to provide the health care. So I would be smart to say, okay, I'm not going to provide it and pay the fine, and it would be cheaper than providing health care. But this is the same kind of a situation. Is, you know, when it gets to it, if we go to a state system by July 2012, what does that look like? And I'm not lobbying one way or another on that issue at all, because it's a matter of, I don't know what it means. I don't know what it means to local control. I don't know what it means to providers at this point. And a lot of us are kind of just, you know, all we're asking for is equitable, you know, pay for the work that we do. We're also asking that across the state, everybody has equal access to services, and that's all, you know, and our state association has made pretty clear, and they're kind of leading the way, so I'm kind of staying out of that. I kind of agree with where they're going, just as long as you have an equitable system, and that's all we've ever asked for. And all I've ever asked for is to get paid what it costs me to provide the service, and I do what I have to do to keep it in marketplace value where people are willing to buy from me. So that's...
I just, and I'm kind of like you, have seen bits and pieces of this bill, and I've always been a proponent of county involvement because the accessibility for those folks who need help. We saw the difference in our folks to be able to get access for DHS provided services go down dramatically when we lost our local office, and I fear that very same thing. And with a total state-run system, if they're going to do that, I want them to take it all.
Yeah, not part of it.
Just not part of it. If they're going to take it, I want them to take it all, because my fear is, in our chairs here, people have been used to good accessibility with knowing that within a half an hour they're going to get some help. And my fear is, with a state-run system, as a lot of the DHS provided services right now, there will be a phone call to Carol, and then you wait and see when,
or Dad, Susie, whoever.
You wait and see when you might get that help. And in mental health services, sometimes a half an hour is too long.
Yeah.
And so, and along with the fact that people have become accustomed to that, and in our chairs, we're very accessible, and I want them. I'm very willing to take the criticism and the heat for the things that we have control over. I don't want to get into a state-run system and people being very irritated with us because they are not getting the service that they had had for 20 years. Mm-hmm. So
the difference between between Medicaid paid services and county is generally vocational. Wouldn't you agree that the difference is that what's really not being fair is that people that need vocational services are either getting services or not getting services across the state. And this is where the consortium, I can see a benefit in the consortium, because you're looking at a large area in northwest Iowa that says, okay, what is the standard for providing some vocational services for people? And that's been the real downfall over the last few years, is we have no, whether it's IVRS, Voc Rehab used to be a funding source that would actually help us get jobs for people. We haven't had a referral from them for 3 years, and a lot of providers will tell you the same thing. And then the programs that are available, there's not enough money in them to actually hire a staff person to go out and do that. Fortunately, we got a bunch of our people placed out in jobs before all that fell apart, but now we're down to the more severely disabled people, and how do we go from there? I'm going to D.C. in March to talk with Harkin and some other people in regards to
Prevailing wage.
prevailing wage. The Department of Labor is saying that, you know, they may do away with the prevailing wage, where you provide sub-minimum wage to persons based on time studies and community studies on what the prevailing wage is. You pay a person based on their production capabilities. They're talking about doing away with that, which means there would be really most every program in the state would no longer be able to provide in-center jobs. I've seen what happens when that happens, when the county didn't have enough money to pay for vocational services or in-home or in-center type of jobs like we do for VT and other people. People stayed home and they gave up on working, and it was really hard to get them to go back to work, or it's very, very hard to get, you know, all that work ethic just went away. And that, the only thing that really concerns me right now is where vocational services are heading in the state. And the counties have been paying for that part of it. And if the state, if you go to a state system, does that vocational piece get put in there somewhere? Because otherwise you're always going to have a county involvement, because those vocational services, there's Medicaid, the only vocational services Medicaid will pay for is some supportive employment setups. You know, it's like $900 to do a job development for somebody. And that's a one-time shot on that, and boom, you know, then the money's gone. And, you know, if the job didn't work out, boom, you're kind of done there too.
There's, from the bits and pieces I've seen of this House File 45, is that we lose our levying capability after 2012.
That's what I just read through it again before I came down, just to make sure.
And so, if we have no mental health levying authority, where would anyone think that we would be able to generate the dollars for anything outside of that, or why we should generate dollars for anything outside of that?
And you don't know you have no idea yet. If I just read through it too, you have no idea whether the state is going to come in and levy against you for services, even though you have no control over them. I mean, that's the one thing I would be concerned about as the county supervisors. That could happen too. And just reading through it, I don't see anything that prevents it. I don't see anything that creates it. But I also say, you know, how many people from Sac County needed services, and the state says, okay, Sac County, you owe us this much. You know, that could happen too. And that concerns me too.
To be generated from where?
Yeah, exactly. When you don't have the levying capacity to do that.
Basic.
I don't think so.
I mean, that's what I think the theory is that general basic is this pot of the and I know this isn't true, but the unknown dollars, you know, and they just think that, well, then you'll just have to come like anybody else that comes out of general basic and say, well, I need $50,000. Well, what do you need it for? Well, I need to run my work activity center for these folks to be able to sit home. And then it's up to your guys' decision to be paid or not. But it doesn't make any rhyme or reason right now as to how it will unfold. But I will say, in defense to the consortium, is that right now we're kind of glad that we have it formed. I mean, we've always been happy with it, but it's like, okay, if they go talk about regionalizing, or they talk about this, or, you know, changing things and stuff, and if we have to work together, and we all know that it doesn't matter what exterior corner you're from in the state, we kind of get forgotten at times, and it's like, we feel that we've done okay, that we've done a good job. But they, like you said, Rick, people call and say, well, what can you do? And it is a needs versus a want sometimes, but they get something. They get a return call. They never used to get that when it was the old way. You know, you wait for months for a service call. So I don't know what's going to happen, but it's.
Lisa, I want you to refresh our memories. What are we providing with? What rates are we providing, or would we be considering? All the Medicaid stuff is, like Mr. Winkman had said, is set. There's no negotiation there. What are we paying for that? What are the county services that we're paying for?
Well, there's the contracted work. Got a couple of DD. To get some SDL. without having my matrix service.
Well, and I certainly.
I know there's some that I'm not thinking of, but.
Do you guys, well, your RCF care is a daily rate county paid usually at any of the RCFs, and that would be.
Minus the HAB if they can get on
Yeah,
HAB.
if they can get on HAB. So I don't know if you have people that receive like RCF through Pride Group or through Alberta and Palo Alto, there's Kathleen's, there's, there's those types of services that would be, that when you go to place somebody out of county, that you'd be able to utilize the rates that we've set, that's just less paperwork for everybody, basically.
Have you looked at their set rate versus what we're paying for some of these services?
No, I haven't.
That would be something that you should look at.
Okay.
And we have a new matrix for the next fiscal year that we could email, Lisa, not a problem, that has everybody, the rates that we negotiated for next year, if you want to look at them.
I mean, that would be interesting information for us then.
Yeah.
Where you,
No, I can send you that, that's not a problem.
I'm a little mixed up over it. If you're in the consortium, you just have all the counties have the same county rate.
for county
For
funded
each
services.
Individual, the agencies still have their individual rates,
Yeah.
but all of the 9 counties that are in it would pay the same rate for that agency. Does that make sense?
It's not each county coming in and negotiating a different rate, it's
So like-
basically what it did.
Pride Group up in Dickinson. Dickinson's not.
Is it based on the CRIS rate? Is the CRIS rate used to develop that?
Mhm.
Okay.
I guess I would ask that you look at what we're currently doing and see how we compare. I mean, that,
And like I said, it's, if you join a year and you don't like it, you can always pull out. It's not like we ostracized Dickinson and Hammond County, we still work with them on things, but it's, they just chose not to be in it, and that's fine, and they can do all their own rates and negotiating and stuff. It's just that, if I place somebody in, over in Emmett County, and I have to use the rates, then I usually call Dorothy and say, what are you guys currently paying? So when I go in and at least talk to them about what's fair and equitable, I do my research just like you guys do when you pay for something. Everybody does the research, and it's easier when you have 9 counties paying all the same rate. You can call any of us and say, what do you pay for the 7 county rate? That's convenient to be able to do that. And some new and interesting ideas have developed out of it. Like you said, John, is that if you have something and it's going south, a program or something, how do you guys fund it? How do you guys do this? We bring up those questions as a group in one meeting, and that's nice to do too. But we're hoping that if they send us down the river, we have something as a unit to talk about, as a consortium when we get to Des Moines and spring school and say, oh, wait a minute, there's...
are any of those 9 doing a county management plan together?
All of our county management plans pretty much read the same. There's some little differences of caveats where, like, Cherokee County has a cap on what they'll fund for BI individuals. They just have a set amount each year that they use, and when that amount's gone, it's gone. Plymouth County does not fund BI services unless it's case management BI waiver and the person's developmentally disabled, then we have to pay that little portion of,
There are more and more clusters
that
that are doing 6 or 7 county
Yep.
case management plans that are all the same. They're going together and making one plan instead of having...
The 99 county thing is not
That's not true anymore.
That's not anywhere near that. That's not anywhere near accurate, but we can't seem to get that off the table that it's not that way.
Is there anyone in the consortium looking at redoing their management plan anytime soon?
Kind of redid it here a couple of years ago and looked at it just because of the changes the state requested us to change, and stuff, but the formats are pretty much all the way down about the same.
Okay.
Well, like I said, we like it, but it doesn't mean it's for everybody.
Back to the House File,
45.
are there more urban areas pushing this? I mean, they're providers, John? Where's this coming
I think everybody out in the provider community, from with our state association, what I'm hearing is that for the most part, we're all in agreement on one thing. We're not going into details pretty much as we're in agreement on equitability across the state. Waiting lists are are kind of crazy. But on the other hand, we've never had a waiting list here that I know of with Lisa, so it's been, you know, we don't want to see one created here either. So, you know, that part has been nice for us. But I think agencies across the state are pretty much behind the fact that we don't care what kind of system you give us as long as it's equitable and that people have equal opportunity to the services. And we've seen that not happen. And it's not happening across the state. Right now, we're pretty well, you know, fine in the mix where we're at, but we've been on the short end, and I know there's other people that are on the short end right now as far as that. And if they go with the regional, or if they go with the statewide system, you know, if they go regional, then you've got what she has here that could possibly become a region, which would be good because because I totally agree with you. If you're anywhere in western Iowa, you just well be in Nebraska when it comes to decisions. You could be sorry in Des Moines, but that happens.
It's the same way in northeast, south. You know, they just.
Yeah, if you anything west of Des Moines, it starts to become less and less important to what happens out here, based on population. I'll give you that, but it's also, you know, it's always been that way in the 31 years I've been doing this. Is that western Iowa gets left out. We just get left out every time that something happens. And
It's not only mental.
I understand that. I know that. I guess from yours, Rick, when you go to the commission, have they talked about those county paid services, those vocational services, or are they just talking about Medicaid? Are they talking about?
It's mostly Medicaid, and
right.
and what pieces I've learned about House Bill Title 45. One of the big things is the legislature is looking at the waiting lists, and Polk and does Lynn have a pretty good sized one as well? Anyway, they threw in $25 million to eliminate the waiting list as part of this House File 45. Well, yeah, the waiting lists are important, but my frustration is ever since I've been going, and I'm about termed out here. In April, I'm done. You do 6 years, and that's it. But there's a pool of money, and since 1996, they keep thinking and keep trying to slice it in a different way with the same or less amount of money in the pool. And that's just very frustrating because if there's not enough money in the pool, it doesn't matter how you slice it.
No, I remember when I was Senator or Representative Heaton tried to help me 3 years ago, and said, well, we can help you, John. We can go to the risk pool, or we can go to that pool of money. He calls up and said, well, no, that nobody had pulled it, so it went to education, so the pool was gone. There was no money to help me out at that time, and he tried. But, you know, if they establish that pool and keep it instead of drawing from it, so that when there is a crisis in one part of the state or another, they can...
That is a useful tool. That really has, but I think
it's not
probably at least 2 or maybe 3 years out of the 6, that's been zero.
There's been nothing there.
The other thing is that I'm fearful about that risk pool. This is just my opinion.
You're entitled.
If they don't give us levy power, and they establish the risk pool to band-aid it for, say, 1 year, then they give us no levy power after that, and then does that risk pool money just kind of fold back into the state system, and then they have all this extra money to run?
Well, yeah, they would. Because
that's just my opinion, is that I've been around long enough that I'm fearful that is, and I'm fearful for the counties that have fund balances. Because
it's just called logical. That's called logical progression. If you set up the risk pool and then you go to a state system and the risk pool is set up for the counties, then where's that money go? And that's just logical progression.
That's the other component that I'm
It's still just, in my opinion, it's a useful. It's a useful tool to get the money in emergency. Because
if it stays,
there have been times where that has taken care of it, and then there have been times that there's zero there, and all the changes, in my opinion, most of the changes since '96, when they've tweaked this thing, is to get money quickly somewhere where it's needed, but that still doesn't change the aggregate of the pool.
Yeah, I know, but I would assume that you would agree with me on the counties running the state system had been a positive thing.
I would say it had positives and negatives.
And
when I sat 3 years ago and I was sending people from Sac County home, or Calhoun County people home, and people from DD County or Carroll County were still staying and working, that was inequitable to me. And that was when the county system failed the people. It had nothing to do with the counties. It had to do with the county system itself failed the people. And that was when I testified that we need a more equitable system. And I did testify at the courthouse at the Capitol several times in regard to we need a fair and equitable system that where it doesn't matter what county you're from, if you have the need for the service and you're entitled to the service, you should get it. Well, that wasn't happening. But when you have this mix of county and state, and right now the only thing that really concerns me with Medicaid so far, you know, yeah, we had to take a 2.5% cut last year, which we're still living with, which we're still getting paid less than what it cost us to do our job. And as a business person, you can't do that forever. You have to, you know, we have no customer to pass extra expenses on to. There is no customer to pass extra expenses. So Medicaid has been pretty level except for that bump there. And so I'm not unhappy with that. My concern is the vocational services that we're not being able to provide and the chances that we may even lose our ability to provide the contract service. Now, Lisa's predecessor set up contract services, which is kind of a replacement of sheltered work, okay? And it's based all on individual need. And if we have work available, the person can come in and work, and we get paid based on a formula that goes through that. So I don't know how many counties in the consortium have that type of service. I know there's a couple of counties that are trying that same thing too, but ours is very unique. I mean, it was set up basically from the standpoint of we all these people sitting at home, and there's no way we can do anything for them, so we, you know, the county set up this contract services thing, which was a big benefit, you know, from having nothing to having something that it was at least partially possible. But I'm really concerned is with the whole state system and the county system is what are we doing vocationally for these people? When I came here in 1979, people that should have been employed were doing arts and crafts. And in my 30 years, I was able to turn that around. We got people working at Farmer Bakken, we've got people working at nursing homes, we've got people working at grocery stores. That's what I feel like we accomplished. Now I'm sitting there with, they call it Dayhab, and it's paid by Medicaid, and really we're back to arts and crafts again. And for me, it's like, you know, all that work that I spent 30 years doing is like, I'm right back where I started. And it's very frustrating for me because I totally believe that people should work if people can work. And work is a very integral part of people's lives. And I've seen what happens when they're not able to work anymore. They totally lose. I have a gentleman that I actually had hired as a almost full-time staff person that used to be a client, was costing nobody for vocational service. He had a real job. I even gave him a 5-year plaque. Well, he quit because his roommates didn't have to go to work anymore because they no longer had shelter work. Okay, he quit the real job, and so then I saw the work ethic all fall apart, and it was like, well, I don't have to go to work because I don't need to. Why should I go to work? I don't need it. I've got enough money to live on. Why should I go to work? And for me, work is important, and that's the one that I think that might get lost in this whole shuffle. Is we can't let it get lost in the shuffle. It either has to, you know, if the counties are, if the states, like you said, the state's going to take the system over, then they need to deal with that vocational piece too. And if they don't, that's the only real concern I have. If the state comes up with an equitable system where people get served, you don't have tons of waiting lists. Again, the waiting list money though is probably you could take it all and give it to Polk County. All right, from what I understand,
they had enough, supposedly enough, 25 million to clean everybody up for a very short time.
Yeah, for a very short time. And so yeah, you could clean up Polk County, but you couldn't clean up the whole state with 25 million. And
well, no, I think they could very briefly, but then that
short
list,
term.
Yeah, that
short
list
term.
continues.
Short term.
So.
Yeah, so I can give Lisa some more information, that's fine, that's not a problem. And you guys are already are Chris members, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so, you know, there's not an added learning curve there, except for it is a learning curve, everything is a mental health. But we can do that. And like you said, you know, get a hold of any of the providers that are in those counties, and they'll let you know. Some are a little bit more active than others, but
okay.
They'll talk to you, I'm sure.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem.
Did you want this, John?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
said, to just let the state have it. But I think you're right.
Thank you, sir.
If that does happen, people are going to have to drive farther, real close. We'll just look at the demographics. You know, Calhoun County's losing population. We're losing population. Ida County. And we'll just say, well, you know, we can centralize this and save money. And so, you know, we might not have a presence in South County. When you go to Carroll or...
And that's my, like I said, my fear was that as we saw the VHS services get more difficult to get, their phone calls don't get answered right
I
away.
have no idea. I just came in this morning.